Good afternoon, Year 3 children, and welcome to our topic session on the Stone Age. So today our aims are to find out all about the Stone Age. So we're going to look at a big overview of what the Stone Age is, what people lived in the Stone Age, and what they did and what they wore and what they ate. We're going to find out all about it. Okay, so what I'm going to ask you to do is to just make a few notes. So when you think something is interesting, I want you to jot it down, okay? Just write some brief notes so that you can refer back to them when you're going to do the activity later on. Okay, so we're going to start by thinking, what does prehistoric mean? Now, you might have heard that word describing dinosaurs before. Okay, so there's a big clue. But I have put some pictures on this slide for you to look at, and they will give you some clues to what that word prehistoric might mean. So what I want you to do now is press your pause button, which I've put in the bottom corner to remind you what it looks like. Okay, and I want you to either talk to your grown-up that you're with, or if you're on your own, have 2 minutes thinking, what does prehistoric mean? So that word prehistoric basically means prehistory. But this describes a time that was written before records existed. So prehistoric means when we didn't have any records of what was going on at that time. We've just had to, from things we found, from clues we found, predict what we think life looked like at that time. Now, if you can see on the PowerPoint at the minute, I've got a picture of a skull, okay? Now, skulls and bones, one of the key things that architects needed, those key clues to be able to make these ideas about the Stone Age, okay? So if we go back to these pictures that I gave you to look at, a few of you who are looking very closely will have noticed that they aren't pictures that we might see now, where we might have taken them on a mobile phone or a camera. These pictures are drawn, and that is because archaeologists have had to find these clues and make these ideas, and then artists have used them to draw what they think life was like in the Stone Age. So a big clue, and probably one of the most famous clues that we have about the Stone Age, is this one, and this is Stonehenge. And a few of you lucky people might have either heard about this or seen it. Well, Stonehenge is over 5,000 years old. Can you imagine how amazing that is, that we've got something that tells us about something that was built so long ago by people that have been so much older than us? It's incredible, isn't it? So if you ever get the opportunity to go to Stonehenge, it would be fascinating to see. Okay, so let's think then, when was the Stone Age? So if that Stonehenge was built 5,000 years ago, we know that the Stone Age is going to be a lot further in history than we thought, okay? So the Stone Age covers a huge period of time, over 3 million years. Wow. The Stone Age starts from when the first human-like animals came into existence. The earliest evidence has been found in Africa. So early humans arrived in Britain more than 800,000 years ago, but Britain has not been constantly lived in since that time due to climate changes. So the ice and the cold temperatures during the last period of time, known as the Ice Age, meant that the early humans left Britain in search of warmer climates. So obviously the weather back then was a lot colder, and people couldn't really live where we live now because it was so cold. Okay, at that time, Britain was not an island, so we're an island now, we know that. So people could just walk across lands into Europe and Africa. Can you imagine that? Being able to go, oh, see you, mum, I'm going to walk to Africa now. It'd be crazy, wouldn't it? Because we know the Stone Age spanned such a large period of time, okay, we need to break them down into smaller time periods so we can understand how they changed over that time. So the oldest time period is called the Paleolithic time, okay? And that was around 3 million BC. So a very long time ago. So during this time period, the earliest humans, who were called either hominids or Homo habilis, they used simple stone tools that were developed from modern humans we call Homo sapiens. And Britain was connected by land to France and Denmark. But the second time period was the Mesolithic period, okay, and that was around 10,000 BC. And people led largely nomadic lives as hunter-gatherers, constantly on the move in order to survive. So people were moving around more and they were doing lots more hunting because they needed that to survive. It was during this time that Britain became an island, okay? So the land we were talking about where we could walk over, that stopped and we've got seas around us now instead. And finally, the last period is called the Neolithic period, and that was around 4,500 BC, okay? And in this time, that's when farming began and pottery was developed and villages were built. So more things that we're familiar with started to come in the Neolithic times. So why then do we call it the Stone Age? And again, I want you to pause this video and either have a think by yourself or talk to your grown-up that's with you. Why is it called the Stone Age? Have a think by giving you a clue there. So it's called the Stone Age because the earliest humans used stone to make sharp tools and things to build with. And stone, as we know, is very strong, and they used to carve it to make a point. So you can see on the pictures, the stone is pointy, isn't it? So they used them for all different types of things, and we'll find out what for. The stone was the material that they predominantly used for tools throughout the Stone Age. Which countries were populated then? So where did these people live? So today there are over 7 billion people in the world. That's a lot of people. So even at the peak of the Stone Age, so when the Stone Age was most popular and there was that many people, it was likely that there was less than 5 million. So we have a lot bigger population than they did in the Stone Age. There are a lot more people. About 2 million years ago, Homo habilis, which remember means that the first people, so the first people appeared in Eastern Africa. If you look carefully on the map, you can see the red dot there, and that's showing you Eastern Africa and where the first people who were in the Stone Age lived. So a bit later on then, about 1.5 million years ago, Homo erectus, which basically means not the oldest people, but the next group of people, they were living in southern Caucasus and northern China. So if you look on the map again, we've got the Africa mark where we first saw it, and then we've got 2 more now. So we know that there were people, the next lot of people were living there. So 400,000 years ago, the early human population had spread to Indonesia and Europe. And again, if we look at the map, we can see more red dots are starting to appear in Indonesia and Europe now. So we're spreading more, aren't we, as time goes on? And then by 27,000 years ago, we had set foot in Australia, Poland, Japan, and Serbia. So look, we can really see how the Stone Age, as time went on, people were gathering, weren't they, in more areas and exploring more of the world and the countries. So it wasn't until around 10,000 BC that early humans reached North and South America by a Bering land bridge that at the time connected Serbia and North America. Okay, so we can see the 2 dots that have just been added on. That's because they found a way to get to South America and North America by the land bridge, so by a big bridge. So what type of houses did they live in then? Well, we know what our houses look like, but we need to start thinking, how would our houses be different to the ones of the people in the Stone Age? So it said it depended on the time. So it depended, we had our 3 times, it depended which part of those times you lived in. So in Britain, archaeologists have found evidence of 4 different types of dwelling, and that means 4 different houses. So what types of houses did we live in then? So during the Paleolithic time period, when the ice came, remember the weather was very cold, some early humans sheltered from the cold in caves. Why build your own house when somebody else's is already available? That's a good point, isn't it? So they went inside the caves because the caves were a lot warmer. And look, they could light the fires and it would probably be a lot more snug than being out in the freezing cold. So later on then, in the Mesolithic times, evidence was found in a place called Howick, which indicates that a circular structure was lived in that was made of wooden posts. There are no existing houses remaining, but archaeologists have found marks in the ground that they believe were made from timber poles, and timber is a type of wood. The frame may have been round and shaped like a teepee. So you've got a picture on there, and we know what teepees look like. Some of you might have even been in a teepee. Says they may have used animal skin, thatch or turf to cover the frame. And animal skin will be quite thick and quite warm, won't it? So that'd be good material to build with. And there was evidence that the floor was covered with a layer of moss, reeds and other soft animal plant materials. So we've got very soft, we've got like moss carpets, haven't we? Can you imagine your carpets being made of moss? So in the Neolithic time period, the one that's closest to us, evidence suggested that houses were usually rectangular and constructed from timber in the Neolithic times. So they're going to be a lot more like how we would see the houses we live in now. And we can recognise that from the picture. So none of these houses remain again, so there's no evidence of them, but we can see from the foundations, so from the marks that they've left behind. Some houses used wattle and daub for walls and thatched roofs. There was evidence that the floor was covered with a large layer of moss, reeds and other soft plant materials. So again, like in the Mesolithic times, they were using plants and soft animal skins to line their floors to keep them warm. So it says wattle and daub are a mixture of manure, so that's poo, clay, mud and hay that are stuck together with sticks, and they've been woven in and out of the timber frame. Ooh, can you imagine? It might be a bit smelly in that house, mightn't it? Okay, so in the last time period then, that's called the Neolithic period, we start to see people of the Stone Age using more stones to build their houses. Okay, so the stones were built into mounds of rubbish that were called midden, and these could include small stones, shells, mud, and even animal bones. Ugh. It would provide some stability as well as insulation. Now, we might have heard that word insulation before, and if we ask our grown-ups, they might be able to tell us where there's insulation in our houses. But insulation, if I give you a couple of seconds to think about it, why is it so important for a house? Okay, so insulation helps to keep the heat in our houses. So if you ask your grown-ups, they might tell you that there's insulation in the wall and in the windows in our houses that help to keep us warm and protect us from the cold. So these houses in the Neolithic period then, they're usually round and they had beds, storage shelves and even hearths in the middle, and hearths is where you would put like the fire pit. So what clothes did they wear then in the Stone Age? Well, lots of people wore animal skins to keep them warm, because we said that the skins would have been quite furry and keep us nice and cozy. And they were sewn together using bone needles. So the fine bone needles that have been found were probably used for embroidery as well. The bodies of a boy and a girl buried around 28,000 years ago in Russia were found with thousands of ivory beads of fox teeth covering them, work that would have taken years to complete. That's interesting. We also know that people were weaving fabric back then, which could have been used for clothes, and dyeing spun plant fibres different colours. So maybe fashion started a lot earlier than you think. So they were using lots of different plants to get colours into their clothes. So they were starting to think about what looked nice as well as what was practical. And most importantly then, what we're all wondering, what food did they eat? Well, animals were the main source of food, so they ate a lot of meat, okay? They would eat all of the animal, so nothing went to waste. When all the meat was stripped off the bones would be smashed so the marrow could be eaten inside. And we've got marrow inside our bones as well. Okay, so it says marrow is very high in fat and would have been a good energy source. Says some archaeologists believe that early humans would have cut open the stomach of an animal and eaten their last meal. Ugh. So they would have gone inside the belly of maybe like a mammoth and eaten their meal inside that they'd eaten. How gross is that? Ooh. So it says, although it is thought that farming largely began in the Neolithic time when many more plant-based foods became part of people's diets, there is evidence that people were eating foods such as beans, seeds, lentils, nuts, and grains over 23,000 years ago in the Paleolithic period. So lots of these foods that we'll recognise today, they were eating then, as their diet was a lot more varied than you might think, including many plants that we see today. Okay, so they've got sunflower seeds. So some of you might have seen some sunflowers growing recently, and in the center of the sunflower, there's lots of seeds, so they would eat those. They would eat nettle leaves, which you might think, oh, that might be a bit painful. But if you heat the nettles up and boil the nettles, you can make things now like nettle soup, and that's because when you boil it, it takes away the sting, so it wouldn't have hurt them. And then also hazelnuts. So how would they have communicated then? Well, symbols have been found alongside cave paintings in Europe, used repeatedly in the same clusters of different caves. And look, if you look in the pictures, you can see some of the symbols that they would have used. And it says similar symbols have been found on their jewellery, suggesting that there was possibly a communication system that existed 30,000 years ago. And that's so clever. So it's almost like their own language that they had, which was through the symbols. So last of all then, what did they do? So what did they get up to in their day? So they often dug for flint, they hunted and gathered food, they made tools and weapons, prepared animal skins to make clothes, made objects out of clay, they made jewellery, and they did paintings as well. And we're going to be looking, I think, later on at some of the paintings that they did and maybe even having a go at some ourselves. And then one of the most interesting things I think is that they used dogs just like pets as we do now. So it says dogs would help them with hunting, and graves have been found where dogs have been buried with tools, just like they buried humans. So if they've given them tools, they obviously really valued them and maybe thought in their next life they wanted to use these tools to help them live and protect them. It says this tells us that dogs were treated like part of the family. Now I know if some of you have seen my other video that went up this week, you'll see my dog, and I've already told you how much I love my doggy. So if you've got a doggy at home and you know that they're part of the family, that's very like it was in the Stone Age. How interesting is that? Okay, so what I want you to do then is I want you to either use this sheet that we've attached onto the timetable, or you can create your own sheet. And I want you to imagine that you are in the Stone Age, and I want you to tell me how you think you would dress, so you can find that box and draw a nice picture. The foods that you would have enjoyed eating, you can either draw them or write them in the boxes. I want you to have a go at drawing what your house might have looked like. And then I want you to tell me 3 things that you would spend your day doing if you lived in the Stone Age. Now you've got your notes to refer back to, but you can also go back through this video to the points we talked about, these different sections, and use them to help you. Okay, I'm really looking forward to seeing some of these on Dojo, and I really hope that you've enjoyed learning about the Stone Age, because I can't wait to learn more about it with you. All right, have a nice afternoon. Goodbye.